Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We're talking all about obesity this week. If you missed Tuesday's show where I talked about the real reason humans are becoming bigger and bigger, the waistlines are bulging, make sure you go back and check out that replay. We can put that link down below for you. Super important. But I want to take your questions on how to overcome obesity, weight loss, blood sugar issues. We can try to keep it in that arena today. So do me a favor if you've got questions in that area. Go ahead and start pumping those into your chat box now, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can in the allowed time. Also, make sure you hit that like button below and hit that subscribe button. If you like what we're bringing to you, hit that subscribe. Let's break the shadow ban that we're under. So let's dive into your questions. Let's see, Lynn says, I have candida and Aspergillus problems in my gut. I'm starting a detox for mold now. Can I take the digestive enzymes made from Aspergillus? So I don't know, Lynn, why you were told you have an Aspergillus problem in your gut, but generally people don't have Aspergillus problems in their gut. Candida maybe, yes, but not so much Aspergillus. Now, where Aspergillus tends to colonize on humans is in the lung fields. It's called aspergillosis. So I would doubt that you have Aspergillus in your gut. I might just ask you to talk to your doctor a little bit more in depth about that. But it's safe to take digestive enzymes that are derivative of Aspergillus. It's perfectly fine. You could also go with digestive enzymes that are derivative of plant, like for example, bromelain and papain, which are typically derived from pineapples. Let's see, let's go down on the left just a little.
Might be all the questions there.
Okay. Let's see. I wanted to advise, okay, so Mohammed's asking about advice on thiamine testing. ETKA, erythrocyte transketolase coefficient activity is what I assume you mean. Yeah, your results are okay. So if you're at 8.4%, that's fairly decent. But it's not the main test I would use for thiamine. It is a better test than, say, serum thiamine or serum vitamin B1 levels. But if you can get with your doctor and ask for a lymphocyte proliferation, that would be even better to help you understand whether or not you have a vitamin B1 deficiency. B1 super critical for energy generation, and it's how we actually, it's one of the main ways that we can break down carbohydrates is using vitamin B1. So B vitamin deficiency, very common roadblock to effective weight loss and weight control. Let's see, can you comment on chlorinated swimming pools? I love to swim and it doesn't seem to be affecting me, I'm not sure. So the biggest problem with chlorinated swimming pools is if they're indoor, that chlorine gas really settles on top of the water and you're gonna breathe a lot more of that in because there's nowhere for it to go. And remember that chlorine interferes with iodine uptake into the thyroid gland. And so what can happen when you have excessive chlorine is your thyroid won't work as efficiently, won't work as well. And remember, thyroid is what sets the metabolic rate. So if you're interfering with that, this is where people can develop things like hypothyroidism or low thyroid function, which can lead to weight gain, can lead to poor recovery, fatigue, hair loss, muscle loss, and many other types of problems associated with an increased risk for obesity. Let's see here. If I consume food late at night within 1 to 2 hours of sleep, could a gentle 30-minute to 1 hour walk help stomach emptying time and mitigate the negative effects of having food in the stomach during sleep? I don't believe, I think that's a myth. That's my opinion, is that if you look anywhere in nature and you see animals when they eat, what's the first thing they do is they go lay down and sleep. Sleeping actually is promotive of digestion. The only time sleeping poses a problem for someone is if that person has eaten too much food or eaten a terrible meal that's irritative to the lining of the stomach, and they're getting that regurgitation when they lie down because of gravity. So, this is where sleeping could be contraindicated for somebody who just ate. But I mean, yeah, you can take a walk. It's really not necessarily going to speed up your gastric emptying time, but you know, I'm a fan of eating when you're hungry and not letting sleep. What, you know, some people say if you eat before bedtime, it's going to make you gain weight because you're not burning those calories before you go to sleep. I call BS. That's not true. And so again, unless you're having heartburn or reflux when you eat at night and lie down, then there's, in my opinion, there's no real need to worry about it. Oh, I love this comment. So Betty says, I was helped. I was already doing organic, more fruits, more vegetables, but no grain, no pain was a game changer. And the supplements, so very grateful for Dr. O. Thank you, Betty, for that sweet comment. Let's see here. Struggling with histamine, still looking for a culprit. Most people that struggle with histamine intolerance, either you've got either a food allergy that you haven't figured out, possibly you're in mold. Mold causes mast cell degradation and histamine release. It's possible that you have a yeast overgrowth in your GI tract. That also can trigger it. High histamine can be caused by parasites. High histamine can also be caused, in general, by environmental allergens, and so, you know, those would be the things I would ask my doctor to rule out first and foremost, because those are typically the biggest reasons why. Now, some people also don't make DAO, which is an enzyme, diamine oxidase. It's an enzyme that degrades histamine. Or tryptase. Tryptase is another enzyme, and both of these things can be measured. And if you're low in these enzymes, then you may have a histamine intolerance as well. And so there are supplemental things that you can do, and there are probiotics that you can take that help to degrade histamine as well. For example, Biotic Force would be one that you could use in that regard. But testing to get it figured out is, in my opinion, the most important. Let's see, Sharon says, I'm 69, no medications. That's awesome. High five, Sharon. I follow you faithfully, but I can't afford several different supplements. How can I target and fulfill my needs for my best health and afford it? Top two things, Sharon, if you could only do two things, and these two things I do every day, among others, but number one, ultra nutrients, which is my premium multivitamin blend, multivitamin mineral. So that covers a lot of bases. I like to look at it as food insurance, just depending on where your food comes from and how it was grown. Not all food is as nutritionally dense today as it was 50 years ago, so that multivitamin, multimineral becomes critical. The second would be omega-3. And so in that regard, either Omega Max or Ultra Omega would be what I would suggest that you look at. Working on a budget, pound for pound, those two things, absolutely, in my opinion, the top two. Let's see here. I like this comment. So Suzanne says, I eat a keto diet with full-fat dairy for close to 20 years. My weight's never been better. Yeah, I mean, no, low-fat is a bad idea. I like this. Mark says, should we try to fatten up as much as we can before the famine hits next year? The lean will perish. You know, there's two sides to think about that. You know, because when you fatten up, you know, depending on how you fatten up, if you fatten up in the wrong way, if the proverbial, you know what hits the fan, you want to be strong, you want to be fast, you want to be quick. So be careful on how much you try to fatten up. Let's see here. Can you develop more allergies as you get older? Used to eat any fruits or vegetables. Now my nose drips after eating green peppers or sweet onion. Also sneeze when eating carrot oranges. Yeah, you can. Those are called acquired reactions. And one of the biggest reasons people develop acquired food allergies or acquired reactions, sensitivity reactions to food is It's not necessarily age, it's more like damage accumulation over time. So what is it that you're doing on a daily basis that has the potential to damage your GI tract? For a lot of people, it's their medicines. So many medications affect the GI tract. As a matter of fact, I think it's worth, we'll post a link underneath. I have an entire lengthy, in-depth article on drugs that cause GI damage or drugs that affect your GI tract. And so you might want to check that out if you're taking any medications. But beyond that, beyond medicines directly, there are a lot of other bad behaviors that people have depending on their diet. So, genetically modified foods, pesticides, other chemicals, eating and drinking out of plastics. These are all things that can damage your gut as well. Highly processed foods and additives and food dyes. So you want to cut those out. A lot of people develop allergies as a result of overwhelming their GI tract's capacity to deal with the garbage. So you've got to really tighten up your diet on that side too if you want to try to control how you develop food sensitivity. In my practice, a lot of people, we restrict initially. After testing them, we restrict, and that restriction allows us, after a time, it allows us to re-expand the diet back out. So I like to say we restrict so that we can expand. But sometimes it requires some restriction in the beginning. If you've never been properly tested for food sensitivities, you might consider that. We can put a link up to that as well, because we actually we have one of the most advanced technologies in the world for food sensitivity testing. Any advice on dental implants and root canals? Don't know what direction to take, having many root canals in my mouth and also a lot of missing teeth. And the dentist is recommending an implant. Well, one, I'm not a dentist, so I'm just disclaimer here, I'm not an expert in that. However, I will say this, one of the things that I would do if it were me is I would go see an environmental or a biological dentist. There's a really great website, IAOM as in man, T as in Tom, IAOMT.org. And they list environmental biological dentists on their site. So if you're looking for one, that's a good place to start your search. And then to have or ask them to do a cone beam image of your mouth line, because you may be okay. I would never do a root canal myself personally, but it's easy for me to say that today knowing what I know. Maybe if I were faced with that 20 years ago, I maybe would have made a different decision, and maybe that was your case. But a cone beam x-ray will allow you to see whether or not those root canals have infection in them. And if they do, that's when you make a different kind of a decision as far as implants are concerned. So start with those two things, working with a good, trained and good experienced biological dentist. Linda asks, why do I put on some temporary weight when I eat even true gluten-free baked goods? There's a lot of reasons why that could be the case. So, depending on what the gluten-free baked goods are made from, a lot of them are almond flour, which is super high caloric, right? And so you may just be over consuming calories if you're eating a lot of those gluten-free baked products. And so it could just be an increased caloric issue because of the nut flours being high in calories overall as compared to other grains. It could also be that you're using heavy amounts of tapioca or cassava, which are super high glycemic. And so this is where you're driving up your carbohydrate intake too high. As I talked about on Tuesday, you're shooting for a third carbs in your diet and a third fat and a third protein. And if you're eating a lot of these baked goods where they're using high starch fibers, then you're driving your carbohydrate intake up too high. And when your body has more carbs than what it can metabolize as energy, it will convert them into fats, and it will convert them into triglycerides. What you might want to do, Linda, is ask your doctor to run a test on you, measuring your triglyceride levels. If your triglyceride levels are too high, you kind of have an answer that, because triglyceride levels don't usually go up because you're eating too much fat. Usually they go up because you're eating too many carbohydrates. So if your triglyceride levels really, if they're above 100, you need to check your carbohydrate intake and probably back it off, and that may be the case. Let's see here. How long does it take for the body to clear mold toxins if you don't actively detox? That's a pretty complicated question, because part of that depends on, number one, whether you're out of the mold. Part two of that depends on how overloaded in mold you were, and how overwhelmed your liver is. Because if the liver and the kidneys aren't up to speed, they're going to be slow to process mycotoxins out of you. Part of that also depends on your current state of health, how much you sweat, how much you exercise, how much you go outside and get fresh air, because those are all things that will speed up the process of detoxification well. But as a general rule of thumb, the longest half-life for a mold toxin that I'm aware of is about 37 days. And that's the half-life. That means the time by which it takes your body to mitigate that mycotoxin out of you, half of it, right? So if we use a simple number like 10, let's say you have 10 mycotoxins in you, it takes 37 days to get to 5. And so, you want to think of it maybe that way, but there's not like a simple 6-month answer when it comes to detoxification, because there's too many variables at play. Is it possible to be obese and healthy? Define obese. I would say that there are some cultures, Dennis, that, like, let me give you an example. If you're an Inuit from Alaska eating 90% animal fat as part of your native diet, you're gonna be heavy. And generally, if we look at the Inuits, before processed food, they really didn't have any incidents to speak of heart disease or stroke, but they were heavier. And one of the reasons why is they were in such a northern climate, they had adapted to storing more fat as a mechanism to basically protect them from harsher, colder climate. So I think we could make probably an exception in their case, and there may be some other exceptions like that I'm not aware of, but as a general rule of thumb in today's society, if you live in the US or any other modern industrialized country, obesity is a disease, and normalizing it is not helping anyone. You see that right now, that big trend toward normalization of obesity. You see it on magazine covers, you see it now in commercials and ads. And at the end of the day, we're really, what it is it's a big little white lie that society is telling itself to try to justify the whole big is beautiful marketing component. And I would argue that I'm not saying that somebody who's big can't be beautiful and can't have a beautiful mind, but if we're talking about real true disease and inflammation, big is inflammatory, and inflammation increases the risk for disease. Disease like cancer, stroke, heart attack, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, autoimmune disease. So I would say obesity is definitely something that you would want to take deadly serious, because it has very much an implication that can kill you. It's a slow death over time, but it can. I mean, one of the reasons why we all did so poorly in industrialized countries, when you compare non-industrialized countries to the pandemic versus countries like the US, why did we do as poorly as we did? Because of the obesity rates. That's another thing that, when you're obese and you're inflamed, your body's immune system doesn't respond or react as well when it needs to be turned up. When fasting glucose is 105, but HbA1c, if you're talking about hemoglobin A1c, is 5.2, and fasting insulin is 3.7, is this prediabetes? Probably not. So there are a lot of things that can impact fasting glucose, which is one of the reasons why you don't want to just look at one fasting glucose and say that's a risk or it's not a risk, especially if your A1C is good, especially if your fasting insulin is under 5. Those are really good numbers that you gave me. Now, you could have gone in and maybe you have a phobia to needles, and so when you go get your blood drawn, you get an adrenaline spike that pushes up your blood sugar right before the blood draw. That's one of the things that we do sometimes see in folks, where relying on a fasting glucose is sometimes a mistake, But I would track it. Next time you get your blood work done, track it again. And if you have a consistent high glucose and you have a needle phobia, but your A1C and your insulin stay really solid, I wouldn't worry about it, unless, of course, you're having the symptoms like hyper and hypoglycemia and irritability, hangry, tired, you're gaining weight. Then I would be a little bit more concerned. But with those other two numbers, probably not as concerned. Let's see, I answered that. Do all nuts and seeds have phytic acid? I get bloated each time I eat them. Yeah, I mean, all nuts and seeds, it's not even necessarily the phytic acid, but all nuts and seeds have components that are designed to shut down your digestion. Why? Because nuts and seeds are designed to perpetuate their own species, not to perpetuate, your life. Although you can eat them and get nourishment from them, if you have a poor or weak digestion, then a lot of the chemicals, not just phytic acid, but also things like oxalates and lectins and other things found in nuts and seeds, amylase trypsin inhibitors is another example. These things have the ability to slow down your digestive process, to make it harder for you to digest those foods, because at the end of the day, a nut or a seed, what does it want? It wants to come out in your poop. Yeah, your poop is fertilizer, and so if it gets to come out with it, then now it gets to go back to the earth, back to the ground, and it's got all the nutrients from your poop that it can start and basically repurpose its own species. Let's see here. I am trying to gain weight. I was surprised when I weighed myself the other day and I had lost 5 pounds. I had started taking Biotic Force. Probably not. Could that have caused it? Probably not. I mean, it's hard. There's just not enough information there, Lori, for me to really say intelligently whether or not you gained it because of that. I mean, I don't know how long you were taking it. I don't know any other variable or factor about what you're doing on a regular basis. But one of the things that you can do if you're losing weight and you don't want to lose weight, but you're in good health otherwise, like it's just a weight loss issue and you can't figure out why that's happening, then one, go get a good general physical examination and checkup, because there are things that that sometimes we don't have symptoms of that can cause erosion of our muscle tissue that could be dangerous, and you'd want to rule those things out just to be safe. But then, beyond that, do calorie counting. I know calorie counting is not an exact art, but I'm never surprised when I have people do this calorie counting because of what you're talking about, where we'll find they're eating, 300-400 calories less than what they're supposed to be based on their activity levels and based on their age, et cetera. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, and this is especially true if you're new to like no grain, no pain, when you're changing your diet. A lot of people are looking for what to eat and trying to navigate and figure out what to eat, and so they end up eating less, at least initially, until they get everything kind of figured out. And that's a very common thing, to just see people being under-caloried during that time frame. Thoughts on 4-day rotation of food? I think food rotations are a waste of time. Honestly, you can do them. You can rotate your food if you'd like, but I'm not a fan of 4-day rotation. I don't think that's how humans evolved or adapted in any form or fashion. I think humans ate food, the exact same food, as they were able to get exposure to it. So like in the summer months when blackberries and blueberries are coming up, you ate those until they were gone, and that may be a month, right? So it's not a 4-day rotation where you're eating something new every 4 days. I think 4-day rotations, or any kind of food rotations, unless you're trying to figure out what you're allergic to, I think that they're overrated. Natural, seasonal variability in your food rotation is the best way to look at rotation. My lower abdomen is distended and hard. I'm not overweight, but thin, have candida and bacteria in my gut. I'm okay. I am okay with taking yeast. I guess you mean, am I okay with taking Yeast Shield Ultra Digest and Biotic Force? Yes. You might also consider, if you've had verifiable candida in your gut, you might also consider caprylic acid. We also have a formula called Microbial Balance, which helps with the balancing out of the bacteria in the GI tract. So those would also be good choices, possibly. Should I avoid histamine foods if I am detoxing from mold? Not necessarily, but sometimes yes. So what I would suggest is it's not an all size fits one that everybody detoxing from mold should avoid histamine-containing foods. More than anything, it's some people that have had long-term mold exposure have damaged their GI tract and damaged their ability to make the enzyme that breaks down histamine. And so being on a low histamine diet for those individuals can be helpful, but not everybody detoxing from mold needs to be on a low histamine diet. When I reached 45, my weight gained about 30 pounds, mostly central adiposity. The biggest known issues that have been confirmed are B12 deficiency. All others have been corrected. Pretty much advice. Check your hormones, testosterone, check your DHEA1. I'd also say if you just hit 45 and you were doing everything exactly the same and you just started to gain weight, there's something inflammatory that you're doing. And that's where test for food, test for chemical exposures. You mentioned nutritional deficiency. If you've done accurate nutritional testing, for all nutrients, not just B12, because those can also have major impactful issues around weight gain. The other thing that we oftentimes see, this actually happened to me, Juan. I was in mold for a couple years, and I lost weight in total, but I put on fat. So I lost about 20, 25 pounds of muscle, and it was all replaced by central fat adiposity in the midsection. And one of the reasons why is the mold, one of the types of toxins that Fusarium, which is a type of mold, makes a toxin called zearalenone, and that toxin is an estrogen. And for men, it will definitely drive up weight around the midsection. It'll cause things like even gynecomastia, where you start to form breast tissue around your pectorals. So you might also consider mold, and mold is not always one of those things that is super obvious. Sometimes it just sneaks up on you. Any luck with your team to find a retailer in Canada? Not yet, but we're not giving up. So be patient, Marie. We're doing our best. What do I think of hemp products? I think that hemp can be very effective as an anti-inflammatory. I think it can be effective for people that have neurological inflammation or neurological pain. I think it can be calmative for many people who have high anxiety. All that being said, I'm not a fan of using herbals or medicines to suppress symptoms without knowing why the symptoms exist. So if you were having a neuropathy, you could maybe take some hemp and it might give you some benefit and improve your quality of life, but we still want to know why the neuropathy is happening, right? So again, know why and don't hide the symptom. And this is true, medicine's notorious for this. If we look at generally the philosophy of mainstream medicine, it's symptomatic suppression with artificial chemical manipulation to appease a patient's pain or suffering, without understanding the root cause or origin of why the symptom exists. And if we look at natural medicine, it's the same philosophy, only instead of using artificial chemical manipulation, we're using natural chemical manipulation. And again, I'm not opposed to that, provided that you're endeavoring into why the actual symptom exists. So you don't want to give yourself a false sense of security, because if you have an underlying problem that you don't know about, it will progress and it will get worse, and it most likely will lead to something that could deteriorate your life, your quantity of life, your quality of life, etc. Let's see, Donna says, hi from UK. I've been struggling for years with skin rash version of gluten sensitivity. I suffer with fibromyalgia and hypothyroidism. No question, but thank God I found Dr. O and the No Grain, No Pain program. Well, I hope it's working for you, Donna. Come back and let us know, in future shows how you're feeling and doing. How do you feel about taking oregano oil regularly for GI viral detoxification? I don't think you should have to detoxify every day. I think if you're doing high doses of anything every day for the intent of detoxification, then you need to reevaluate the choices that you make in your day-to-day life where you think you need to detoxify aggressively every day. Now, if you're just using some small amounts of oregano, like for cooking and things of that nature, no problem. But if you're using high doses of oregano, we have to respect Mother Nature. Oregano is a very powerful antibiotic. And just because it's natural doesn't mean it can't actually, at high doses over long periods of time unchecked, create a potential problem in your GI tract. Again, so I would say, one, it depends on the dosing that you're using, and two, it depends on the time frame in which you're trying to use it. So somebody's asking about the dental site I mentioned earlier. It's IAOMT.org. Can changes in bowel movements, even within the same day, be necessarily a dangerous sign? It depends on how aggressive the change is. I'd say if you had like diarrhea one day and then it normalized the next, probably not, I wouldn't say dangerous. Because sometimes your body's trying to purge something that you ate, even if you ate healthy. Sometimes there's something in that food that you weren't even aware of that your body is naturally trying to push out. So I would say depends on the type of change in the bowel movement and the duration of it. I mean, if you find one day you're bleeding, yes, absolutely, that could be a dangerous sign. But if you just have a variance in your formed stool versus loose stool, etc., I'd say if it's not consistent over a long period of time, I wouldn't necessarily look at that as dangerous. Let's see here. Let's go down on the right. Thoughts on alkaline versus acidic saliva? Can I get my pH up to 6.8 per recommendation? I'm not a big fan of measuring pH in the mouth as far as like making major decisions for somebody's health. I know some doctors like that. They do what's called an alkaline whey type program, and I'm sure some of them get some pretty good results with it. But to me, pH is too variable, and if you're trying to change your diet to manipulate your pH, you're only going to have some minimal success because some of that has to do with the microbiome of the mouth. And to me, it just, again, that the value versus the headache isn't there. And so pH, although you can measure it, it's not one of the things that I would say we have to measure and monitor that on a regular basis. Let's see, so had pneumonia twice, had mucus plugs removed from my lungs. Plugs were bipolaris, mold. Currently on intraconazole and not sure all molds are treated equal. So you have a mold infection is what it sounds like in your lungs, which is very different than a mycotoxin burden. And so, your doctor's got you on an azole antifungal, which is probably a good idea. There are other antifungals that are natural that you can use. As I mentioned earlier, caprylic acid and yeast shield is another one that's, it's an herbal formula preparation. The other thing that, you should probably be taking is a pretty strong dose of probiotics, something like ultrabiotic defense, a higher dose, it's several hundred billion plus colony forming units, because mold and bacteria are competitive with each other. And so if you, a lot of times when you have a mold overgrowth, mold will create a toxic burden that will suppress bacterial growth. And again, that's suppressing your microbiome growth. So supporting your microbiome during that time is probably a smart idea. The other thing that I would suggest in that situation, if you had mold growing in your lungs, you better check your house for mold, because a lot of times most molds are opportunistic. So even though if you ate something with heavy amount of mold in it, your immune system should be strong enough to kick it. And If you're in mold, though, you are immunocompromised because that's what mold does to humans. It suppresses DNA, RNA, and protein synthesis, which are critical backbones to healthy immune function. And so mold, once you're in it, can create an opportunistic for itself, an opportunity for itself to grow in you and grow on you. And that, is just my experience with a lot of folks that deal with mold. My aunt's 73, weighs 49 kilos, suffers from lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and takes a lot of medication. She has lost her appetite and eats just a few amounts of food. What can we do to help her eat more? It depends on the medicine she's on, Christina, but it's not necessarily what can you do to help her eat more. I would say that the reason she's eating less is because intuitively she is trying to save her own life. When we talk about lupus and RA, most of the time these diseases are food-induced. I've seen countless times rheumatoid arthritis go into remission on no grain, no pain. Lupus as well. And so she may be, like self-selecting to eat less because she feels better when she eats less. And so you don't want to force feed her more. You actually, my advice would be, get her genetically tested for gluten sensitivity, number one. And if she's not open or willing to do that, then, introduce her to no grain, no pain. And hopefully she is open and willing to do that, because beyond that, all those medicines for RA and lupus, those are immune suppressing drugs. They're going to affect the GI tract and damage it. And they're going to shut down her appetite too. So you're also dealing with that. So my experience is people generally don't get anywhere when they're trying to treat rheumatological autoimmune diseases with immunosuppressants. They can feel better symptomatically, but their bodies continue to deteriorate at a good clip. Can I use intestinal defense instead of minocycline for my mycoplasma? I can't really give medical advice on the show. I mean, you certainly could use intestinal defense, but in place of your doctor's prescribed drug, you just really want to talk that through with your doc. Let's see here. What causes hair loss? Lots of things. Protein deficiency, probably number one cause. Stress, probably number two. Let's put a link up to hair loss on our YouTube feed for Imola. Let's see, my fasting insulin is 11 and always was 5 to 6. So if you're referring that your insulin used to be around 5 to 6 and now it's over 11 or at 11, that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's up from where it used to be, but I don't have enough information historically or about other markers to be able to give you an intelligent commentary. Does iron supplementation raise total T4? No. It helps improve conversion of T4 to T3. What causes hair? Okay, answered that one. Can sublingual B12 also help in healing the gut the same way that oral pills of vitamin B12 that get absorbed through the GI tract? Yes, because sublingual B12, even though a lot of it is absorbing through your cheeks, you're still swallowing some of that as well, and so it is getting into your GI tract. Is there such a thing as too much B vitamins? Yes, there is. Some people will have an adverse reaction to B vitamins. Kind of a benign one is that they're staying awake or jittery at night and just not capable of going to sleep well, restless legs, with too much B vitamins. And if you have a major environmental toxicity problem, sometimes high doses of B vitamins they'll ramp up methylation, which is a part of how we do our detoxification. And so some people actually do very terrible on high doses of B vitamins. In my experience, the ones that do the worst, if you feel really awful when you take a B vitamin or a B complex, you better investigate whether or not you're in mold. That's one of the top causes or top reasons why I see people develop almost like a sensitivity to B vitamins where they feel worse when they take them. Paula says, I'm taking your multi-nutrients and unexpectedly it's helped my IBS. I wouldn't have expected that. Any ideas why it helps with GI symptoms? Yes. Because the nutrients in multi-nutrients, it's got to be complex in it. And so one of the things that your gut needs to properly function is adequate B vitamins, especially folate and vitamin B12. If you don't have enough of those nutrients, your gut cells will age and not be replaced as efficiently. Your gut cells are supposed to basically live and die every 2 to 7 days. And so there's this really rapid turnover of the lining of your GI tract. And if you're not turning those cells over quickly enough, IBS can actually be a complication of that. And so again, the B vitamins, particularly 12 and folate, can play a major role in that gut turnover. Is it okay to take 100 milligrams of chlorophyll while working through constipation? Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, just got in. Let's see. Quite frankly, I don't know what to do anymore. WFPB, keto. Bone broth, listen to Furman, Perlmutter, McDougall. Whom are we to believe? What's the old saying, Sherry? Opinions are like people, or opinions are like a-holes. Everybody has one. Not to say that those doctors beyond me that you're listening to are that, but everybody's got different opinions and different experiences. And so, that there's no such, I think the issue is there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach. When people get confused about what they should be doing, it's generally because they're getting conflicting information from different expert opinions that they trust. And so ultimately, we're all not right. We're all generalizing in an effort to try to bring attention and education and light to the forefront so that you have the ability to make better decisions about what you should be doing. All that being said, generalization is not specification. In order to be specific and give very specific advice to people, that requires a relationship, right? And although we have a digital relationship, the best relationship that you can form if you want expert advice is find the doctor that you trust and base your decisions on how to live your life in a healthy way on objective and subjective data, not just off of opinions, right? So like if somebody comes to my practice, I don't just say, go do no grain, no pain, and then call me in 6 months. We do testing, right? We want to do objective testing because I want to know, beyond generalization, what they should or shouldn't eat. Beyond generalization, get good sleep, exercise, get clean air, get clean water. Those are fundamental basics that everybody should be doing. But beyond those fundamental basics of generalization, what is it that's affecting a person's health that's unique in their situation that if we knew about it, we could make changes about it to improve their outcomes? And again, that's why everybody's so confused. I think the other reason why so many people are confused is, and the doctors and the folks that you mentioned in your comment, I know all those people. They're all good people. I don't think any of them are trying to be misleading. Again, they all have their own experiences and unique views. But a lot of experts out there are under the undue influence of commercial interest. And I talked about this a few weeks ago. If you tuned in, we talked about particularly the AND, the American Nutrition Dietetic Association, how they take money from Coca-Cola and Pepsi and basically the people who are poisoning us. And 90% of that budget for that organization comes from the very industry that's poisoning us all. And so you would expect that you're going to get conflicting information and biased information from people who are under that undue influence. And that influence extends very widely. It extends in ways that even professionals don't even realize. I mean, from how textbooks are being written to government policies that are being put into place. And, people generally have, unfortunately, a naive trust in government as if the government has your best interests in mind. And it really, honestly, in my opinion, in my experience, it doesn't. And I've been around a lot of government. I was in the military. I've worked government jobs in the past. And so they don't have your best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind, and if that means sacrificing some lambs, they're more than happy to do it, in my opinion. We kind of tangented there, didn't we? So Judith's asking, how do you get your spouse to go gluten-free? I'm getting gluten every day with my non-celiac gluten sensitivity. I have diarrhea daily, fatigue, insomnia. I've tried for 10 years to get him to not use gluten in my kitchen. That's a tough one. I think part of it just depends on your relationship with your spouse. I mean, to me, if you sit down and have a loving conversation with your spouse, hopefully they'll have an understanding that you have that need, and that they'll basically, even if they're not going gluten-free, they'll agree to not cross-contaminate you. And so I've seen some success with couples, Judith, is, if you're trying to be gluten-free, is to basically say, okay, you can eat gluten all you want to your spouse, but you just can't bring it into my kitchen. At the risk of sounding sexist, right? A lot of women stay home and work from home or work at home, and a lot of men go off to work and their wives stay home. This isn't true in 100% of cases, but largely it's true for a lot of folks. And whether it's true for you, I don't know. Now, that being said, again, at the risk of sounding sexist, generally speaking, this is the way it works at my house. My wife's domain is the house. And if she says this is the rule in the house, I don't want that here, I don't want that there, I'm going to try to support that. My domain is my office. And if what I say here within my office is kind of the law. So we have kind of both our own individual kingdom that we get to rule over, kind of in a sense, so to speak. And so maybe your kitchen is your domain, and maybe you need to claim it. I don't know. I don't know what the best advice to tell you is, because I don't know enough about your husband and how supportive he is. But as a general rule, if a husband is a loving person, they'll support you. At the very least, they won't eat gluten and cross-contaminate your items in your kitchen. And that's the talk or the conversation that I would encourage you to have, because you're not going to convince an adult to go gluten-free. There's a psychology to that, all in and of itself. And the general rule of that psychology is a person's disease, illness, or dysfunction has to be greater than their fear of change, or they won't change, right? What prompts most people to change when they're sick, right? And so when people seek me out, it's because they're sick and they're looking to find what they need to change. But before they were sick, they weren't seeking me out. Right, so think of that as the same way with kind of gluten. You're not going to get somebody to change their diet in a way that they feel might be too radical if they don't hurt, if they don't have disease, or if they don't associate their disease with their diet, which is not uncommon either. But either way, I'd say don't try to convince them to go gluten-free so much as you convince them to not have gluten in your kitchen. And if he wants to eat it, somewhere else, that's perfectly fine. But have that conversation where he's not cross-contaminating you. Do we have an article explaining functional medicine benefits? I belong to a Christian health sharing program that will share expenses of functional medicine doctors and has a monthly newsletter. Yeah, I've got several in several videos as well. Emma, just get with my team at glutenology@gmail, and we can send some stuff to you. Only my morning fasting blood sugar's high. What would be my next step? I'm in peak physical condition. Your next step for what? I don't know what your goal is, Danielle. Maybe be more specific for me, and I can answer you better. Does childhood leukemia and childhood rheumatoid arthritis have its origins in the womb? No. Yes. It depends. Let me give you an example. If a mother is pregnant and the child is gluten sensitive in the womb, and the mother's eating, sandwiches every day during pregnancy, yeah, there's an influence there. If the mother is exposing herself to every kind of known chemical during her pregnancy, is that going to influence the fetus and the growing baby in the womb and contribute potentially to autoimmune disease? Yes, absolutely. So yeah, there is some association with some of the origins in the womb. I mean, the baby, life begins at conception, right? And so, it doesn't begin at birth, it begins at conception. And so anything that mom is doing can influence that baby in the womb. And if mom is increasing her trigger exposures to things that can cause or contribute to autoimmune disease, then yes, it can absolutely start in the womb. What's a good example of a great blood glucose response to healthy foods? That is such a variable question because one, it's variable in the sense that different foods have different sugar indexes that will drive up sugar. Two, it's different in that people have a different index for which foods are going to drive up their sugar. Like I've had cases where healthy food would spike a person's blood sugar regardless of our belief of how healthy it was. So, one of the best ways to learn about this individually for yourself is to use a continuous glucose monitor and just measure consistently over time. But there's not one size fits all good answer for that question. Oh, I like this. So, Dr. Osborne, my husband and I enjoy your recipes and my photo and the photography of your dishes. Would you consider a new cookbook to give out for holidays to our neighbors? Yeah, actually, we're in the process of talking about that with my publisher now, and my publisher has first right of refusal on that, and if they refuse it, we'll probably self-publish it. So be patient with me. We're working really hard behind the scenes to get more content to you. What about my B12 level being high? Was on injectable methylcobalamin, but haven't been on it for 8 months. B12 high in the serum has no meaning, not really. Nobody's ever died of B12 toxicity. Nobody's ever been hospitalized from B12 toxicity. Serum levels are very misleading, and a lot of doctors will measure serum B12. Look, I can give you one of my lozenges of methylcobalamin, and you can get your blood tested, 5 hours from now, and you're going to have high B12 in your blood. It doesn't mean the B12 is making it into your cell. This is why I always talk about intracellular testing being an important way to measure status as opposed to measuring what's just floating around in your bloodstream that may or may not be being used. How do you lower triglycerides naturally? Eat less carbs. This is the simplest answer I can give you is cut your carbs down to about 33% of your total caloric intake or less. This is what people do when they go keto is they cut it less than 33%. Usually keto's under 20 grams a day of carbs. Triglycerides typically drop. I'm eating 500 calories under my BMR and I feel okay. Is there a problem under going underneath my calorie BMR? Only if you're losing weight. Like if you're maintaining your weight, BMR is a calculation, right? Understand that it's a scientific formula that was created to try to give a person a starting point for how many calories a day they should consume, but it's not an 100% accurate calculation. So if you're 500 calories under your BMR, but you're not losing weight and you're maintaining your muscle and you're feeling fantastic, then I would argue that your BMR is actually probably wrong. But if you're losing weight consistently and you're tired, the biggest problem is catabolism. If you're under eating on a consistent basis, you'll start losing your muscle mass. And that's one of the problems underneath that. Yeah, so question about taking NAC and CoQ10 and lipoic acid after exercise. Would those blunt beneficial adaptations? There's an argument in research on that one. I don't know that anybody really truly knows the answer because the stress of exercise, there's actually benefit to the stress that's induced by exercise. I would say it depends on how much you're exercising. Like I was involved in a research study years ago with professional athletes who were doing, football players doing major 2-a-day practices. And what we found in our study was these athletes had bad recovery and bad performance when they were aggressively exercising if they didn't take antioxidants. Now, if we gave them antioxidants, they recovered quicker and they performed better. But again, does that equate to aggressive exercise versus just moderate exercise? Because there are benefits to moderate exercise, those stress adaptations that can occur. So I personally don't take extra lipoic acid or CoQ10 or NAC because of my workouts. and I do CrossFit as my primary mechanism of workout. So any of you who know what that is, there's some intensity in that. But I don't do 2-3 workouts a day. Again, it's and I don't find that my performance is enhanced by doing more antibiotics. I don't know if I answered your question, but again, I don't think anybody truly knows or has studied the nuance of that. How does one boost IQ naturally? Ask questions, be inquisitive, spend time learning, spend time observing. I think IQ is an overrated measurement as far as intelligence anyway. I think there are different kinds of intelligences that people can have, and I think play to your strengths, but ultimately I think we gain IQ, and IQ is maybe a bad word to use. I'd say wisdom, right? Because wisdom is accumulated knowledge over time and how you apply that knowledge, right? So whereas knowledge is what you read or what you learn, wisdom is the application of experience and the outcome of how that applies to what you learned, right? So to me, I'm not after IQ high points. I'm after wisdom. I'm after application of knowledge over time so that I can get better in what I do. And I think that's what you should be after too. So be inquisitive, ask questions, and educate yourself. After a sea flush, should probiotics be taken to replenish good bacteria? Yes. Is there a gentle gluten-free alternative to something like Metamucil for bad constipation? Yeah, we have something, Eve, called Ultra Fiber that you might take as a supplemental or substitute for Metamucil. Maybe we put a link up for that. What's a great digital scale out there to measure body fat? I'd say is Tanita, T-A-N-I-T-A, is a good brand, but more than anything, it's just use the same scale every time you weigh, because a lot of these machines are going to have a variability within them, an error built within them. So, that being said, if you use the same machine every time you do it, at least you'll have a consistent measurement from the same machine. Is oat milk good dairy alternative? No. Emma, I can tell you're new to No Grain, No Pain. I would highly encourage you to check that out. No Grain, No Pain, the book. You can get it at any major book retailer. You can check it out at your library. Because that question, oats are out. Oats are out if you're trying to follow No Grain, No Pain. Oats are inflammatory for those with gluten issues. What's a good probiotic? Christine wants to know. Ultrabiotic Defense. If you're talking about heavy, strong, super strong probiotic, a heavy hitter, something you might take to support you while going through an antibiotic regimen, or trying to reset, your gut. And then just for maintenance, we have another one called Biotic Defense. So Ultrabiotic Defense and Biotic Defense, Christine. Maybe we can put that link up for her on Facebook. My last C-reactive protein level was 16.8. 4 years ago, it was 4.6. Could a carnivore diet help relieve some of this? Hard to say, Becky, because it depends on why your C-reactive protein went up. I mean, C-reactive protein is an indirect marker for systemic inflammation. So it doesn't tell you why you're inflamed, it just tells you that you're inflamed. I mean, if you were allergic to beef, and some people are, then eating carnivore would maybe be a terrible idea for you. If your inflammation were being caused specifically by some kind of food, it would be helpful, and my advice would be to kind of learn what foods you should or shouldn't be eating, and not necessarily cutting out every food group except meat. I know some people have had great success with that, and I'm not going to argue their success, but if you're talking about longevity, you want to know why the CRP was high. Because if your CRP was high, well, it's 16.8 today, but it was 4.6 4 years ago. It was high then. It's been high, because anything over 0.9 is high. So you got a problem with something causing persistent chronic inflammation, and you need to figure out what it is. For most people, it's food, chemical exposure, nutritional deficits, and microbial imbalance. Those are the 4 major triggers of chronic inflammation. Let's see, I was accidentally poisoned by highly toxic photographic chemicals my parents worked with that crossed the placenta when I was a fetus. I was born with autism and mast cell activation syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos No question there. Hate that that happened to you, Stephanie. Okay, so follow up on that. I've been trying to fix myself since I was 13. Can you help? Call my office. Set up an appointment, or set up a kind of an initial consult with one of my team members to see if that feels right for you. Let's put DPO website up for her. There's a link at the top of the site. It says schedule a discovery call. Because I think somebody else was asking if we take on new people, and we do. I select about 300 people a year that I work with. But we do take on new. The reason we can take on new is because people get better. But you can go to drpeterosborne.com and hit on that consult button or discovery call button and schedule time to talk with one of my team members and see if it's a good fit for you. Let's see. Best time to check your body weight is the same time every day. I mean, if I were advising somebody to check their body weight, it would be first thing in the morning, empty stomach, when you wake up. And if you have a bowel movement in the morning, if you can weigh before, you can weigh after. But again, as long as it's the same time and it's the way that you consistently measure is the most important component to that versus say just weighing every day, because you're going to weigh differently in the morning than you will in the afternoon. You're going to weigh different after a meal. You're going to weigh different after a bowel movement, etc. Can I take iodine every day, even though I did a test that showed optimal result? You can, but then the dose is what you want to be cautious of. You don't need to take mega doses every day. Oh gosh, what are you trying to do to me, Debbie? You trying to get me banned? Do you recommend seniors take the vax? I don't recommend anyone does, but that's not for me to say per se. I think at the end of the day, fear drove a lot of decision making through that whole thing. A lot of people made bad decisions and are still making bad decisions. And a lot of greedy people are making a lot of money off of those fearful decisions. But I don't think there's any benefit at all. I think if a person believes that their immune system's not strong enough to handle the world around us, then there's a philosophical problem in the core of their belief system that no matter what I say, it'll never convince anyone. You have to believe that your body has the ability to fight. And if you don't believe that and you believe that you're weak, and that you need help, and that the help you're willing to grab or take is from known criminals who have huge criminal background histories and have been convicted of felonies, then that's your choice. That's the way I feel about it. What tests do you recommend for checking estrogen, progesterone? I mean, there's a lot of ways to check it. I think the most important thing, Jessica, is that it's not just estrogen and progesterone. So there's estrogen, there's estradiol, there's estrone, there's estriol, there's sex hormone binding globulin, which can interfere with estrogen. And then there's progesterone and 17-hydroxyprogesterone. I mean, there's a lot of metabolites of estrogens and progesterones. And so I think it depends on why you're checking it and what your actual reasoning behind it is. A lot of doctors will check it because they want to put you on medicine, which I'm not a big fan of hormone treatments, because your body knows how to make hormones. And I believe that medical hormone treatments don't actually fix your problem. Yes, they'll give you the hormone that you're not making enough of, but why are you not making enough of it? And that's the bigger question that should be asked. So again, it just depends on what you're after, but there's urine tests for estrogen, progesterone, there's blood tests, there's saliva tests, and they all have merit, and they all have a good ability for analytics. Oh, so the question about, cultural sensitivity, Jessica's asking about a test called it's not cultural sensitivity. I think maybe you misheard me. It's culture and sensitivity, right? So it's 3 words, culture and sensitivity. And that test It's not that that's a test, it's that doctors can do that. Doctors can culture you to see what's growing, whether it's fungus or bacteria, and then they can take that culture and subject it to different kinds of antibiotics or different types of natural agents to see what would more effectively kill that bacteria or that fungus. So it's a culture and sensitivity that you ask for. Your doctor will know what that means. If they don't, it's time to leave. What do you think about kelp? Yeah, I think kelp is all right. It's a good source of dietary iodine. I personally don't like kelp, so I won't eat it, but lots of people love it. My son eats it like candy. So yeah, kelp's a good food, provided you're not allergic to it, provided, you know, it adds diversity to your diet that you enjoy. Okay.
It's the bottom of both.
I think we just pretty much covered it all. So it's time anyway. I'm up 6 minutes over. I'm getting better. I'm getting closer to that 1 hour. Hey, thanks for joining me. Remember, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Again, help me try to bust the shadow banning that's been going on for the last 2-3 years. And come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. glutenfreesociety.org. If you're not signed up for our newsletter there, go sign up. We'll give you a bunch of free information, super valuable, life-changing, life-saving information. Share this with somebody that you love. Together we can help more people. Remember, our mission is to save 100 million lives. And you know, if you haven't already, visit me, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday. We do Tuesday shows at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I'm back here next Thursday as well for a live Q&A. So we'll see you next week. Have a fantastic weekend.